What is going on, everyone? Welcome back into another episode of the 415ers podcast, coming at you 3 times a week on the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network, along with 95.7 The Game. Evan Giddings, Marc Grandy with us as always. Marc, my man, how are you doing? It's not the night before Christmas. I know it's a regular season game, but it feels just like it's a big game on Sunday for the 49ers with the Miami Dolphins coming into town.
It's a huge game. I mean, you can make a case this is the most important game of the year for the 49ers, and we'll get into it. It's, besides the Chiefs, the team's biggest challenge of the year. I think certainly without a doubt. Probably the most they're going to be challenged the rest of the season as well. It's not the most difficult schedule moving forward for San Francisco either. So maybe a last chance to really kind of measure yourself against an elite team in the league. And it's an important game as well. If you still have, sights on a number 2 seed in the NFC, which are still within grasp, you're only 2 games behind the Vikings right now, then this is a really important game. Sure, it's an AFC opponent. It's not really going to factor into any tiebreaker scenarios or anything like that, but still, it's a huge game. And I think considering everything we talked about last episode, Evan, with kind of the hurt feelings going into it seems like all the former 49ers who are now Dolphins. I think for multiple reasons, this is a big game that both teams have been looking forward to. And then as a result, us and all other football fans are looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think you touched on a couple of important things there. One, of course, which we'll get to, the fact, like how it plays into the whole playoff picture. But first and foremost, like I'm with you. I've been looking forward to this game for quite some time, not just because of, sort of the personal relationships involved, but because it's the 49ers, I think, best chance to get a look at what they may see in the playoffs. And that is a team that can first and foremost put up points, a team that secondly has been tested maybe more so than you have throughout this year, and 3, also has some sort of familiarity with you. You can't say that about many, if any, of the opponents outside of perhaps the Rams and your division, than the guys on the rest of your on rest of your schedule. So for me, I'm with you. This is a huge game for the 49ers. And right now the Dolphins are 8-3. They have a 5-game winning streak coming in. I believe they've technically only lost 1 game without their starting quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. Meanwhile, the 49ers, of course, had a much different sort of rocky start to their season than the Dolphins, but they are 7-4. They have 4 games that they have won consecutively coming in. And to begin December, this is an opportunity for, look, I know that a loss, which is obviously possible against a good team of Miami, is not the end-all, be-all. But I do think that a lot of both fans and critics are looking for like that signature win. I mean, maybe we thought it was going to be a little bit against the Chargers on Sunday night, but of course the Chargers were missing a lot of starters, particularly on offense. Like this to me is maybe the first time where you have a team in Miami that is about as healthy as one could be and about playing as good of football as they could play, as well as the 49ers, who we're going to get into some of the injuries that they've sustained from last week and may or may not, be keeping an eye on heading into the game. But they are playing their best football of the year. So you got 2 powerhouses going head to head. I'm a little bit surprised this game was not necessarily flexed to a Sunday night matchup because it has that feel. But Cowboys, America's team, whatever you want to call it. But Marc, it has all the makings of a heavyweight title fight.
It really does. And I think to your point about a signature win, that's not something that probably the 49ers care about all that much. I mean, they are only responsible and in charge of beating whoever is on their schedule. And recently they've done a good job of that. They've won 4 in a row. Miami's won 5 in a row. If you were to kind of take a snapshot of the season up to this point, Niners at 7-4, they've won 4 in a row, 2 wins over the Rams, win over the Chargers. And you look at that, kind of this resume to this point at the beginning of the season, and no one is having that conversation of who have the Niners beat. Because now you look back on it and it's okay, you've beaten the 3-win pitiful Rams. I think that's a little bit of revisionist history because when the Niners beat them, they weren't nearly as injured and beaten up as they are now.
Especially the
Specifically,
first time, yeah.
yeah, specifically that first matchup, but still, certainly, even then, I mean, we said it, I think, after that week 3 game or week 4 game, this Rams team is terrible, and I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. And that has been one of our, takes that has come true. It looks like it's going to this
Yeah.
year. So certainly this is a team where you can, from the outside in, again, I don't think the team really cares about it that much, but elsewhere, media folks, people trying to, figure out if this is a real team that has a chance to win some playoff games. That's the big, sticking point as well. Who have they beaten up to this point of the season? And, they got blown out at home by the Chiefs. And now they have a chance to kind of get that monkey off their back, beat a really good team, beat a high-powered offense. And Miami certainly qualifies for that. You mentioned they haven't lost with Tua Tagovailoa as their starting quarterback, or one loss. And really, that one loss was the game in which he went out, that Thursday night game in Cincinnati, where the Bengals caught a ton of flack for letting Tua even play in that game. Because remember, the week prior, week 3 at home against Buffalo, their best win of the season was when Tua originally got hurt, had that head injury. He came back late in that game and helped them win. And then he starts against Cincinnati, kind of gets swung to the turf and hits his head, and his, concussion symptoms flare up again. And then the rest is history. He missed the next 2 games. They lose to the Jets. They lose to Minnesota. But again, both with backup or even third string quarterbacks playing. I think it was Teddy Bridgewater originally in the Jets game. He then gets hurt. And then they bring in Skylar Thompson, I believe, who most people probably haven't heard of. Why would you? He's a third string quarterback in the NFL. And those are the only games they've lost. So this is certainly a really, really quality team. Mike McDaniel is, kind of, been the head coaching darling of the league so far this year because of what he's done. He's done a fantastic job, but it's also very obvious they have a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball. And it's just going to be so incredibly fun to see 2 great minds, Mike McDaniel and Shanahan, obviously, but Mike McDaniel specifically against DeMeco Ryans, who we've been singing the praises of all year long. That matchup, just the chess match between those 2 guys, is going to be really intriguing.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels. And hey, look, you mentioned it earlier this season, but DeMeco Ryans could be headed for a Mike McDaniel type path in the future,
He's
which
gone.
is
He
a
is
head
gone.
coaching job. That is TBD. Would not be surprised, however, especially with the way this defense is playing. But this is also a defense now that has to go up against the second best aerial attack in football statistically, but maybe most notably, Mark, a team that's put up 30 points in the last 4 games that they've played. Like, they have scored against no matter who's been in front of them. Last week may not be as impressive for those who saw they went up 30 at the half against Houston and pretty much just coasted to a win. But they have put up points against good defenses throughout this season. I'm glad you also mentioned Mike McDaniel because this is kind of, I think, a storyline that people have forced more so on the Dolphins than the Niners, which is, okay, if this is a more important game for Kyle Shanahan or Mike McDaniel, you probably are saying Mike McDaniel just because he's the first-year head coach, even though I think he's on a trajectory to win at this point head coach of the year with the way that he has really just flipped this team from last year to this, and especially with all the off-the-field things that have surrounded Miami.
The top 2 options might be Shanahan coaching tree guys. Robert Saleh with the Jets. Maybe you can make a case for Brian Dable as well, and then Mike McDaniel in Miami.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the reason why I do think this is a bigger game for the 49ers, and we've touched on it a bit, is because it feels to me, Mark, like the 49ers have been a bit untested to this point. And that is also a credit to them because, especially in the last month and a half, they've taken care of business against whoever's been in front of them. But they haven't had a win that you can look at and say, that projects to them going and playing in the first or second week of February. Like they have, I think, a bit of doubt surrounding them, not their defense, but can their offense maintain a pace with a team like Miami that, as we just said, has scored 30 points against their last 4 opponents. Can their offense keep up when their defense does not pitch a second half shutout? That's not going to happen every single week. That's, to me, why this game is as much important for Shanahan and the 49ers, and maybe more so than the Miami Dolphins, because although Mike McDaniel is in his first year, the Dolphins are newly formed. They have a lot to prove and have done it so far with an 8-3 record. The 49ers, to me, they are the more veteran group. They have been here before and have gone deep in the playoffs before. But this season, to me, in this matchup, they have more to prove because they are more untested than Miami.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to make for a really, really intriguing matchup. And I think we're going to see, because this game means a lot for the 49ers, as you just laid out. It certainly, of course, means a lot for the Dolphins as well. I mean, they're still a team that could potentially get the first seed in the AFC, chasing the Kansas City Chiefs right now. The Bills, with a few losses, they're down the pecking order just a little bit, but that's still open, kind of a 3-horse race. The Bengals might have something to say about that, but probably too many early season struggles to be in that conversation. But I think what makes this matchup super interesting is how the Miami offense likes to attack. And we've talked a lot, and if you're a football fan, you've heard a lot about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And you might think, specifically with Tyreek Hill, okay, he's the deep threat. He takes the top off the defense. He's going to get you, a 40 yards in the air, and then he'll run with the pass after that. In reality, that's not, the strong point of the Dolphins offense. Where they get their yards is by using their speed, Tyreek Hill included, of course, to make the defensive backs and linebackers respect that. It opens up so much space in the middle of the field. And if you look at some of the numbers, and this is from Next Gen Stats on Twitter breaking it down, Tua Tagovailoa, 38 completions targeting the intermediate middle third of the field. So that's basically between the hash marks, a little bit outside the hash marks on either side, and, 10 or 15 yards down the field. So not deep down the field, not just across the line of scrimmage, but that intermediate middle third of the field. That's 16 more completions than any other quarterback in the NFL. Again, Tua, 38 completions targeting that middle intermediate third of the field. You look at the Niners defensively on the flip side. Guess what? They take away that same part of the field, the intermediate middle third, better than any other team in the NFL. In fact, again, from Next Gen Stats, since drafting Fred Warner in 2018, the Niners have allowed just 71 completions in that area, that intermediate middle part of the field beyond the line of scrimmage. 15 fewer completions than any other defense in the NFL from that point. So not only do you just have the strength of a great offense against a great defense, but you have what that offense wants to do, targeting that middle third of the field against a defense that takes that away better than any other defense in the NFL. And I, for one, I absolutely cannot wait to see how these teams adjust to try to make that work, because that's the bread and butter for both the Miami offense and the San Francisco defense. Something has got to give in that battle, because, of course, both can't have success in that area.
I'm with you, Mark. And I, for one, don't think it's also a coincidence that since Fred Warner was drafted and has manned the middle, that stat has been relevant. He is unbelievable. And we, of course, highlighted him a lot in the New Orleans Saints game with everything he did and all of his production against New Orleans. I do think that, look, I've honestly been surprised, not just how good Tyreek Hill has been away from Kansas City, but how they also in Kansas City haven't necessarily skipped a beat without him. It's probably been one of the few times where you haven't seen like a fall off or a correlation between a star leaving a place and neither side's really been hurt by it.
Yeah.
And Miami's definitely benefited from it, Mark.
Yeah, they certainly have. I mean, Jalen Waddle was good last year, but they didn't quite have the offense that they have this year, and a lot of that is because of Tyreek Hill and in his addition. You also have to, of course, credit Mike McDaniel and what he's been able to do. But you bringing up Tyreek Hill and Kansas City got me thinking. You remember when he said, I don't remember if it was preseason or if it was early in the season, he was asked, on your new team, what's it like being with Tua? And he said straight up, like name checking Patrick Mahomes, yeah, Tua is more accurate than Patrick Mahomes. And, that comment kind of, makes you think about what Raheem Mostert
Did he?
said.
Yeah. Did he say it's nice to be with a quarterback who can sling it finally?
But like Raheem Mostert never, in that quote, didn't name check Jimmy Garoppolo, didn't say, yeah, Tua, he better slinger with a football than Jimmy Garoppolo. Meanwhile, Tyreek Hill straight up says, yeah, Tua more accurate than Patrick Mahomes. And I'm sure it was a gigantic deal, in Kansas City and Kansas City Sports Talk Radio and all the affiliated podcasts and all that. But that's Tyreek Hill, not necessarily dissing, but yeah, dissing one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Meanwhile, Raheem Mostert says something that might be about Jimmy Garoppolo, but he never actually says his name, and everyone loses their minds. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah, I think Tyreek Hill also did that interview like shirtless in a locker room with hockey goggles on, and people weren't really sure whether to take him seriously or not.
Good point.
No, the Miami Dolphins have been the subliminal shooters of the NFL to this point this year, and I also think that it starts with their head coach and Mike McDaniels.